You introduced this technique to India. Why is it so revolutionary in the field of acting?
So it talks about this concept where you take on the body of a character. So how powerful that can be, and there's a whole process. Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs got a lot of input about his character, not from the rational mind, but by working with the imaginary body. The Natya Sashtra was called the fifth Veda, which is the text or the treatise where we talk about theatre, we talk about art.
What's so special about the movie Godfather?
There is so much detail that his eyes are kept in the shadow. Cinematographer has done that intentionally because it is symbolizing and creating a particular kind of character. So she says that I'm lying on her feet, she's giving me a bath. Then I climb the jasmine tree. I sing and the flowers bloom.
So you have met Charles Sobraj in person.
What if he mixes poison in your cup and, be careful? And it is like, chill. Why will he do that? I mean, I'm going to make a film on him first of all.
So what are some common mistakes that actors do when they prepare for auditions? Pleasure to have you on the show, Oorvazi.
It's my pleasure.
So how is life treating you these days?
Life is wonderful. I'm exploring, going back to first principles and finding myself because I think who am I is a fundamental question. So going deeper into that and finding new dimensions of myself.
Exploring yourself.
Yes.
And that's nice. Turning inward, as they say.
Yes.
So you have been a acting coach, filmmaker, educator. So when did you realize that this is something that you would dedicate your life to?
Okay. So I think that fundamentally I'm an artist. And because filmmaking was part of my growing up years, dad was a filmmaker. So I used to go on the sets and watch dad making films. So that was something automatically that became part of my life. And of course, it was a journey when independent cinema started. But teaching and acting teaching and film teaching was actually by default. So, I mean, I would like to elaborate on that journey. So, if I take you back first to how filmmaking started, while I was in college itself, I was in Jai Hind College, and I started being part of the company. So, SBI Impresario was a company that my dad started in 1975. And before that, he worked with Chetan Anand, very much in the Indian industry. But I would say with Chetan Anand, it's the popular meets the art. And a great person, I think, to enrich the sensibility of art in you. So dad was part of the Indian film industry, but soon he felt that there was a need for him to start his own career. So he was part of Channel 4 and started his own company. And I was in college and I started joining him. So I was the spot boy and the boss. So, you understand when it's your own company. So filmmaking started very early in life. Soon there was an opportunity where, in fact, a friend of mine said that, there is this school, this IB school, International Baccalaureate School, and they are looking for a workshop on filmmaking. So why don't you go there? So initially I was a bit hesitant because I was not formally trained as a teacher, and they were also looking for some further prospects. So I was ignoring it, but she repeatedly told me, no, please go, please go. There was some intuition in her. So I went, the workshop went very well. And then the faculty who was teaching film left.
Okay.
So from there started my journey of 15 years where I'm now teaching international baccalaureate and solely responsible for film as the subject. And then acting teaching happened where there was again a friend who wanted me to take a acting appreciation workshop where I kind of tell the students, acting students, about various acting techniques. And that really actually nurtured my interest in understanding that there are so many approaches to looking at acting. And till now, I had not really looked at acting as an art form because I was a filmmaker. So yeah, you deal with actors, but what is it really that is acting as an art form was something that really got, the seeds of that were sowed when I was exploring this workshop. And I discovered a beautiful technique, which was the Chekov technique. He's actually a Russian, Mikhail Chekov, but it's popularized in America as Michael Chekov. So I was really drawn to that as an artist. And then I created my own PhD in the sense of I made my DVD and I got it endorsed by Joanna Mullen, who is now expired, but she really supported my artistic venture.
Mhm.
And that was how my journey into
So you you are saying you did research and got it approved. So that's how the PhD
yeah,
works
so
in
it
a
was
tech.
not a formal PhD.
Ha ha
What I mean to say is that
ha.
because I'm a media person,
Okay.
making a film for me and making a DVD was my way of doing my PhD.
Mm,
And it was endorsed by,
understood.
somebody who is very respected in the field.
So you introduced this technique to India as well. So why is it so revolutionary in the field of acting?
Yeah. So when we talk about acting, mostly we talk about psychological realism. We talk about method acting, or we talk about where we use your personal memories to act. And I mean, that's the general, thing that is spoken about. This is an approach where I would say today, even more, it's appreciated because it is scientific.
Scientific.
It is scientific. And today, when we look at so many aspects of spirituality, so many aspects of the body affecting the mind, and this was somebody who was doing it way back in the 20th century. And when we talk about the whole history of modern acting, really started with Stanislavski.
Yeah.
Right? And Stanislavski, what was different from Stanislavski was that he was representing a whole method of acting where it is not stylized, it's not theatrical, it's not larger than life, it's not codified, but it is something where you're using your own self and your own personal memories to kind of take that into action.
Kind of your life experiences.
The life experiences. Now, in acting training, actually, it's very important that we have the work of the training with the senses, which is actually the germ of what is not spoken about so much when we talk about method acting or when you talk about Stanislavski. But the senses are the foundations for going to these emotions or really triggering the human instrument. And that's a whole thing in itself. But coming back to Chekhov, therefore, Chekov is a psychophysical method of acting. So rather than working with your internal process of the mind or analyzing a script or working from triggering your personal memories or your actions, there is a lot where a Chekhov actor is, I would not say working outside in, because it's not only the physical body without imagination, but it is how your entire being, your physical being and your mental being is involved with this process.
Kind of
So let me
unison.
so let me give you an example. If I talk about a tool of the psychological gesture, what happens is that at the essence of every character or every emotion, there is a physicality which you internally feel, but you don't express that out.
Understood.
Let's say, as an emotion, if I hate you and I'm sitting in the presence of you, right? Somewhere inside me, my body is telling me, go away from me. Stay away. It's pushing me,
Very
right?
true.
But I might do reflections of that, or I might not do it. But there is something inside that I can feel that physicality. Now, what the Chekhov technique in the psychological gesture as a tool does is that you as an actor start with that physicality and let that physicality then grow on you.
Interesting.
And if that happens, then every toe, every cell in your body is become part of that feeling. And it's not only an internal process that's happening in your mind where your body doesn't know what to do. So that's just one illustration, but I think to give you a glimpse of the process of how it works.
So if I understand, if I'm getting angry, as you said, I'm hating you.
Yeah.
So in the first instance, without the Chekhov technique,
Yeah.
is where I internalize. I wanted to push. Let's say I wanted to push, but I don't push. I restrict myself. But here you are saying it's completely different or holistic. Like I start.
But that is a behind the wings tool. So on stage, you don't do that.
Acha.
On stage, you don't go and push. You do that as your rehearsal tool.
Okay.
You do that to feel that internal state. So rather than feeling at a point where you felt angry and going back to that emotion of feeling angry, you now use the body to inform you of how it felt. And then you don't do that. In the scene, you don't do that. But that has made you, triggered your entire being, your internal state to feel a particular way.
Understood.
And then that will reflect with your text, or that will reflect, in certain ways. But this is a very simplified form of trying to explain to you. Of course, there's a whole process to how you can...
Can you give any example of this in recent times so that people can relate to? That any character that you can think of?
No, so it depends on if that person has used that tool or not. So if we talk
got
about
it.
somebody using the Chekov technique, we have Anthony Hopkins, who's famously used it in
Silence of
Hannibal
the
Lecter,
Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs,
Hmm.
where he used another technique or a tool of Chekov, which is called the imaginary body. So normally when you wear, say, a blazer, or if you wear something which is very formal, you feel very different. If you wear shorts and you're wearing sneakers, you feel very different, right?
Yeah.
So it talks about this concept where you take on the body of a character. So how powerful that can be. And there's a whole process where, we explore taking on the body of a character, then collaborating with that character in our subconscious and our imagination, and then working in incorporating it and taking it forward. So Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs got a lot of input about his character, not from the rational mind, but by working with the imaginary body. So, those eyes and that look that he was maintaining, his whole persona and all that was largely inspired by his work with the imaginary body of Chekhov.
So are these different school of thoughts and acting technique? There's Stanislavski, then there is method acting, Shekov technique,
Yeah.
being taught in like NSD or IFT, Whistling Woods. You have been a part of that institution as well
Yeah.
to actors who come in to study?
Yes, I would say that today many of these techniques have been taught in various institutions. But if I can use this opportunity to kind of explore and elaborate on what is the evolution of acting and how do these techniques
Sure.
play themselves and why they are important. Because many times we have actors who say that, hame to emote karna hai. Why should we really bother about a particular approach to acting? So to start with, I think acting is not about a lie. We use it very casually when we say acting is about pretense or acting is about saying a lie or doing something that doesn't exist. Yes, it is, because it is not the actor's reality and it is not the reality of the audience. But at the same time, acting is all about being truthful. Right from that prop that you pick up, if you're reading a newspaper, then it's about reading that newspaper fully and completely. It's not about pretending to read the newspaper. It's not about pretending to have a headache, or it's not about pretending to do any activity, which is the most basic thing that you can do. And again, if you want to take it at a more complex level, then the truth of feeling that emotion, the truth of everything. So the basic thing is that it is not your reality as an actor, but as a character, it is your reality. So you have to make it real. So that whole process of making it real and feeling it real for yourself is very important. That's when the audience will feel that it is real. So the truth is at the center of performance. And if you don't have truth, if you don't have that truth which the actor brings in and then the audience brings in, then there's no performance.
Authenticity.
The authenticity. And therefore, acting is about basically making that imaginary situation, that character, that emotion true to you.
Yeah.
And various techniques have various approaches to doing that. So, for example, if we talk about Meisner as a technique, then we have it highlights, besides other aspect, it highlights the importance of being alive to the co-actor. So if I'm sitting with you and I'm supposed to be doing a scene with you and you are ignoring me or I'm not feeling something very positive with you, then I would ideally play on that. I would use that in the scene to see what it does to me. Basically, be more open to everything that I'm getting. Or on the other end, if you are very warm and there is a very positive energy that's coming from you, I will use that. If you have said something in a particular tone of voice, I will pick that up. If there is a particular body language, I will be basically very receptive to everything that you are doing and saying, rather than just playing from my own, my own stock of box of things that I have to say, my dialogues. Okay, now I've said that. And I'm not even aware to what you're saying, how you're saying. So Meisner is so much about really being very open to playing with that co-actor and that energy that exists in the space, besides many other things. But I think how, for example, if an actor can understand that, that becomes such a beautiful dimension to look at acting or to understand acting. Now, if we look at Eric Morris as a technique, Eric Morris is building on the method acting on Stanislavski's work of basically what Stanislavski was talking about was using your senses, using your instrument, and that is very important. But Eric Morris is now taking that forward in terms of that the challenge is that how do you feel what you feel? How can I, if nobody is dead in my family, how do I feel that grief, right? And he points out a very interesting dimension where he says that the instrument has to be open. We as actors, if we come into the space for acting training, we have our own inhibitions. So somebody might be shy, somebody might be underconfident, right? We have our own, and we have our phobias, or we have our difficulties, we have our emotional blockages, etc. So Eric Morris said that self-awareness and opening up those blocks are so very important, right? So right from physical tension to physical inabilities that an actor needs to work on, developing that self-awareness in the body, in the mind, to emotional hurdles that can be removed, So it's a lot of, I would say, deeply psychological in that sense. And then he has beautiful advanced techniques where he talks about animal behavior, where he talks about sub-personalities. So where every individual has their hidden personalities which come out in certain forms, and how you can bring that but as a process and learn to bring that, be aware of that and bring it in your work. So that's Eric Morris. I think every technique brings a very interesting dimension and a focus to how you look at acting, how you look at the challenge of playing a character and an emotion. Also, I think we already spoke about Chekov, but Chekov brings a very beautiful dimension to acting, which I think sometimes is ignored in the modern times, about the ideal artistic self. So Chekov's work is all about not coming from the personal space. He was a disciple of a student of Stanislavski. But at that time when he was learning, he was all about not having to use his personal memories. And he said that, why can't I operate from a space which is not my personal, because I've got a lot of negative things which I don't want to go into. So he was working from this universal body. He was working from the concept of how can you operate from a space which is not the ego. And I think that is a very beautiful thing that he brings about. And I think we'll all agree that in all forms of art, be it writing, be it painting, you really are inspired as an artist when you are in that state of flow. And that state of flow is when you are not waiting for the applause from the outside, when you're not conscious about your failure or your success, or that you want to be praised. So you're not stroking the ego. Right? But you are in a state of just enjoying the process, and that is a space where, when coming back to Chekhov, we talk about developing this ideal space in the heart, which, if you talk about the body, is a very important space, and now even scientifically proved that if you have compassion in the heart, if you are starting with a very non-ego space of operating as an artist, and you work on developing that as an ideal space, then you start from there and you end there before you go to your raw personality.
Got it.
And I think that those attributes, are very important, that can be useful for a modern actor.
Yes, indeed. And you let go of all these biases and preconceived notions that you had before.
Yes. And unfortunately, in India, especially, I think there is more of a glamour oriented perception when they come to acting training. But at least I think when we are part of the process, when I was part of the Whistling Woods as a 3-year journey that we take our students to, we see that they really mature. And initially they come with wanting to, say, imitate a particular actor, because you look up to a role model and then you want to imitate that. But gradually they enjoy the process and they become part of really understanding themselves better. So acting is about self-awareness. It's you are the instrument and you are the player. So like a painter has a canvas outside on which he paints, here the human instrument is the canvas. And that, in fact, I found fascinating, where, one eyebrow I raise is that statement that I'm making. The way I sit, the way I use my voice, the way I feel, how I control my emotions, how I show that character.
It's all part of the acting.
Yeah. So my entire being is part of that artwork, and you become the artwork. There is no separation between the artist and the artwork, which I find very beautiful and rare in as an art form.
So how was your first day like? Started teaching a classroom full of so many students.
Okay. So you're talking about acting or filmmaking?
Acting, as an acting coach.
Okay. As an acting coach, I've been involved with the Michael Chekov technique. So there it is normally a batch of, say, 20 to 30 students, because it's a very practical approach. And it's a whole journey with which the student is going through.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's always beautiful because every time you teach the technique, you are learning something new. And
Mhm.
now I think is what more than say 10, 15 years now I've been teaching the technique. And every time I'm trying to see that how do I make it more effective? How do I make it more engaging and meaningful to the actor? So
Mhm.
the process is beautiful. As my foundation for every actor is to understand themselves.
Mhm.
So the more they understand themselves, the better they can grasp any approach or technique as acting or as filmmaking or anything for that
Yeah,
matter.
no,
Yeah.
very truly said. So, as an acting student,
Yeah.
someone should be aware of all these techniques which are available and then try to blend in or make a
But
fusion.
first be aware of yourself. And
Self awareness.
some techniques help you in that self-awareness process itself. And but just that mindset that acting is first about using your instrument. So you need to know your instrument so fully.
Yeah,
Right
yeah.
from working with your body with yoga or tai chi or any of those aspects or kalari, to working with your mind with meditation and being more self-aware and catching yourself, you know.
Mm.
And also I think a very interesting thing is that before you study any other character, you are the best character to study. You know yourself better than anybody
So, know
else.
yourself, kind of.
Yeah.
So, these are kind of like assignments you give while teaching, like self awareness techniques. What do you do?
So when I was teaching the course, I mean, Chekov is a different technique altogether.
Mhm.
But even before going there, I used to have this course module on self-awareness, where
Mhm.
I used to try and work with the students right from creating a self-portrait, where you know they can use media or they can use drawing and painting if they're involved in that to try and understand who they are. And I think a very useful process is also the archetype,
Mhm.
that Jungian concept of archetype, that which where do you align and what is your basic desire in life. Also sometimes as youngsters we are not really thinking about the spiritual question of who am I,
Yeah.
right? But I think the more you get insight on that, you
Not
get
maybe
a
in the 20s, especially.
clarity. But I think somewhere down the line it's an important question, and
Yes.
especially for an actor, because that helps them also to not take their negativity or their trauma into performance.
Mm.
So I feel that as an actor, you can either go to the mental asylum. We've got a lot of actors who faced a lot of psychological difficulties, have ruined their life or had
Mm.
problems with their life. And then at the same time, the other path that you can take as an actor with the right processes and by wanting to actualize yourself and not just being glamour struck is evolve.
Mm.
Because you're being able to master, you're being able to understand, you're being able to explore everything that is human.
Mhm.
So I think it's a great side effect.
Yeah, I think Heath Ledger was a prime example of this,
Yeah.
being consumed by the role.
Yeah.
How do you see that actually, people getting consumed by a role or a particular character they're playing?
So I feel that one aspect of this is that where you're not coming from a non-ego space, and you are so determined to want to prove something to yourself or to the world, right? That you go into that space. Secondly, you use a technique or a tool not to its complete evolved manner. Like when we even talk about method acting or we talk about Stanislavski's use of personal memories, from the first time it was used, because at that time that difference had to be there of stylized and something larger than life to being a naturalistic tendency which developed. But Stanislavski himself has gone to using the body, has gone progressed from just the typical personal memories. The whole concept of
The evolution.
yeah, the evolution of that. And even other acting teachers who have stressed imagination, who have stressed other aspects than just using your personal memories or psyching yourself up. And I think the best way of approaching acting is the switch off, switch on. Not just remaining in that continuously like a kind of I think any art should be progressive. It should be joyful. So when you use certain techniques, where you are not you're not harming yourself, but even if it is a negative thing, you're enjoying it.
Got it. That's beautifully explained, actually. So these days, there's so much of talk about overacting. I have heard somewhere that it's actually not overacting; it's either original or it's fake.
Hmm.
So where do you think this comes from, especially in the Indian cinema?
See, when we talk about Indian cinema, uh, before we came to, so let's just talk about the evolution of acting in general, right? Largely all over the world, religious practices and religious origins of acting was there in if you talk about the Western world, we're talking about in Greece. um, if we are talking about India, we're talking about the whole concept of it being having its spiritual. In fact, it was called the fifth Veda. The Natya Sashtra was called the fifth Veda, which is the text or the treatise where we talk about theater, we talk about art. And in the East, we have no theater, or we have the Orient, or we have a lot of traditions all over. The progression from, therefore, a trance like state of performance, uh, which was very heightened, to something which was psychological realism, which came with the evolution of with in the 20th century with Stanislavski, and texts also. Like you have the plays of Anton Chekhov. All this, the text and the style complemented each other. And slowly on stage and in cinema and then in Hollywood, you have the method, blowing up because of actors like Marlon Brando, big stars who are adopting that kind of acting. And then you have then a postmodern stage where now you go back to taking aspects of trance or taking aspects of a larger than life thing and say combining it or going beyond the real. So I would say that there is, yes, you're completely right in saying that there is an authentic acting, and that authentic acting does not necessarily have to be naturalistic acting. It can be a stylized form of being larger than life. It can be like when we talk about Ritvik Ghatak, we're talking about melodrama. We're talking about a very heightened form of emotions or a display of something. So it's not necessary that something that is larger than life or that is loud is bad or is superficial if there is a truth to it. Right? Again, if you use a mask and you're doing something very stylized, or if you have an audience which is not intimate, you might have to do a performance which is larger than life. But if it is truthful, then that's the parameter to which you gauge it, rather than it being naturalistic and subdued and something that is larger than life. In fact, when we talk about a lot of the tradition of India, the acting was, even when we talk about the Natya Shastra, it was more emotion centric. And it was not so much about the plot or realism, but it was more about the spectacle. Why was it the fifth Veda? Because the great knowledge that was there wanted to be shared with the masses. And using song and dance, using entertainment, using a plot, using a story, using poetry made it more accessible to the audiences. So that whole aspect of, I think, in India, a spectacle or the emphasis of emotion has been a very important part from its ancient tradition. But it has got influenced a lot by the coming of the sensibility of psychological realism in film. Like we had neorealism as a movement in cinema, and we talk about that whole realistic sensibility that comes into play when we talk about Satyajit Ray, or we talk about Do Bigha Zameen as a realism that seeps into not a larger than life theatrical form of performance or making cinema. So I think this larger than life form has been part of Indian tradition and somewhere will always be. Like I think Sanjay Leela Bansali beautifully brings in this larger than life theatricality of performance, and yet there is so much truth to it. And at the same time, there is the beauty of something very subtle and something very revolutionary and yet modernistic, like say an Anurag Kashyap's film with say Devdi, where he's interpreting something in a very modern context and not theatrical and larger than life.
What is one particular emotion that is very difficult for actors to invoke?
It depends on the personality and the person. Usually, there are some people who can cry and emote pathos very easily. And at the same time, that becomes very difficult for a few people where, they don't cry very easily, or it's not very easy to cry. So I think pathos or sorrow is an emotion which can go both ways. Again, anger, again, depending on various people. So sometimes I have come across exercises also which we do in class where people say a simple exercise where, they are expressing anger in just roaring like a lion or just screaming or just opening up. They've never done in their life. So it's dependent on a personality type.
Individual personality.
I don't think you can really generalize so much. And again, it depends on what tool they're using. So if they're using a very psychological, realistic tool, then a particular emotion that they are using and that is very effective and that is triggering, then that emotion will work. So I don't think generalizing on that is very simple to do.
Yeah, understood.
But love is a very complex and interesting emotion. And if you look at the Western context, and if you look at the primary emotions that are explored in the West, and also from a scientific point of view, and if you look at in the Indian tradition, then in the Navrasas, and you talk about the whole concept of Shringar and love, which is considered the primary, state of emotions, where in the Western context, love is not as part of that, primary scale of looking at emotions. So I find that a very interesting exploration in the Indian context to look at emotions or to explore emotions.
How is it culturally different of teaching acting, especially compared to the West? In the Indian context, how do we teach? Is it very different from West, or is it similar?
So when we talk about, first of all, when we talk about the Indian context today, the Indian context is got a lot of assimilation of the West. And I think a lot of credit goes to two prominent figures when we talk about the history of acting in India, and two institutions. So we have the NSD, which is the National School of Drama in Delhi. We have Ibrahim Al-Qazi, and he was trained. Of course, I'm sure that he had a lot of Indian tradition in him, and he brought a lot of classical and folk theatre into NSD, but also his training in RADA, that is the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in England, that made him bring the Stanislavski as a basic aspect as modern acting into India, right? And then we had FTI, the Film and Television Institute of India, and we had Roshan Taneja, who was again a very prominent figure, and he was trained in the Neighborhood Playhouse School of Theatre in New York. And he brought a version of Stanislavski, which is the Meisner technique to a large extent, but it had the basic way of addressing psychological realism in performance and screen acting. So these two figures brought from the international shores a lot of what we teach today in acting in India. Having said that, we have aspects like Navrasa Sadhana, which is taught in there are few individuals like Venuji. He's one of the few individuals who teaches the ancient form of the Natya Sashtra, which can be, it's taught in a very traditional way, but it can be applied in a very usable Indian context. And so if you talk about the origins of the ancient, it is, as I said, the concentration of emotion. And actually, I would say if we look at the differentiation from its origins of emotion, of the style of the Indian and the West, then let's take Greece and let's take the Natya Shastra in India, right? And if we talk about the approach of the Natya Shastra, we see that it's about rasa. It's about experiencing a rasa as an emotion. So you have the Nav rasas, and basically what is happening, to put it in a very simplified manner, there is a latent form of those emotions that exist in each human being, as an artist, as an audience, as an actor.
What would you call a Russia in English?
Rasa is something like a flavor of something.
Okay.
Like, that you take, you relish that flavor of something. Like you're having wine and you relish that flavor and those nuances of those notes inside you.
Okay.
So you relish performance. And when we talk about Navrasas or we talk about rasa theory, we are talking about literally, I would say, a transformative state of ananda. A transformative state of that emotion.
Kind of ecstasy.
So when we talk about rasas, we are talking about not the raw emotion, but how art is transforming it, that latent form that is there of that basic seed. So if you're taking anger, there's a basic form of that seed of that anger in every human being. And then it's treated with art. It's treated with transitory feelings and the various processes of art. And it's converted into a state of feeling that in a very heightened way. So it's not an ordinary raw emotion.
Understood.
Right? And I think it's interesting because it goes to that non-ego self. And then again, it depends on the audience. The audience who can get those layers and nuances, or the audience some people are not capable of getting that. So they will enjoy what they can of it.
Yeah.
Right? And when you talk about Greece, if we look at that as the starting of the Western context of the international performance, they're talking about the purging of emotions. They're talking about, especially with their tragedy. So, tragedy and comedy was something that was like the hallmark of Greek theater. And there it is about an excess of emotions which are removed. It is your civic duty. So, theater was very much part of that whole thing of the right balance of emotions, about how it becomes, it's important, but how it's an intellectual process. So, comedy was about, besides entertainment, it was about showing the flaws of society. Uh, Tragedy was about removing that excess catharsis of that emotion of, fear and pity. And therefore, if you look at those two approaches, then one is more intellectual, many times plot driven. It's dealing with, I don't think it's devoid of emotions, but it's got a little more of an intellectual, civic aspect to it than a spiritual, heightened emotional, spiritual state
Got it.
to that. But having said that, today when we see, there is always a give and take. So a lot of the Western techniques have taken from, like, even when we talk about Stanislavski, we see that he talks about using yoga, being inspired by yoga. And even a Stanislavski psychological realism technique is ideally wanting an artist to reach a state of flow which is beyond the ego at a particular state. So I would say that every technique, if it is an artistic approach to something, then it's wanting to go beyond just the mundane. And that's why you are an artist. And that's why you
Yeah.
come to experience art, because you want to experience more than that 9 to 5.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And very true. I think as an actor, so before you join any acting school or
Yeah.
decide that I want to go to movies, act, there's a lot that you have to work on yourself that I've coming to learn from you.
Yeah.
Letting go of your biases,
Yeah.
emotion, self-awareness, self-control, regulation, and all these
Yeah.
like emotional adulthood you have to reach to become an actor.
Not many do that, but I
Uh-huh.
think at least they are on the path, and when they are right or when they are ripe, they will be able to achieve that. And I would like to point out here two important areas for new actors who want to venture into acting. Because acting is not about, when they initially come, they're very excited about the outcome, because that's where they'll get the external validation, right? They'll get the applause that really excites them.
That
They'll
should
work
not come
very
first.
hard for that, okay? Ideally, don't bring that first.
Hmm.
And of course, when we are also working with them, when I was with Whistling Woods, the performances come later, but they're very excited for that. And that's when they really come alive. And they don't emphasize enough the foundation. The foundation of observation and imagination. Now, imagination, probably you understand why it's important, but it's maybe difficult to understand why observation is important. Observation, and when I talk about observation, I talk about, of course, the self-awareness and observation of your thoughts or your body, different parts of your body, and all those nuances, and also the observation of the world around you. Because for an actor, there are three important relationships. One is your relationship with yourself, so observing yourself, dealing with yourself. Then is the relationship with the outside world, in which you have the environment, the space, how that interacts with you, the people, the characters, right? So more you observe about, say, a person who's sitting in the train with you, the person who is in the house with you, everything, not just for performing, but for really understanding what it is all about. And the third relationship is your co-actor when you're performing on stage. So your foundation, when you're working with yourself before you reach a stage of even bothering to deal with an outcome, it's about developing your foundations. If you develop a very strong foundation of these three relationships and observe with your body, with your environment, with other people, then it really strengthens yourself to go for the long race, to really become as powerful as an actor who, so a very powerful actor, if he is on stage and he's just picking up his glasses and wearing it, you will find a lot of beauty. You will be mesmerized with just that simple action that he or she does. He doesn't have to, give some big monologue. But if you see any great actor, you are just mesmerized with the poetry with which they will do a very simple action. Why? Because they're so there, because they're so alive, because they're so into that action. And just that is enough to hold the audience, to transport them into that other world. And when we talk about imagination, I think the beauty of that is that, which is very visible in your eyes. So if you can really, really imagine that there is a tree there and you're seeing that tree with your imagination, if you are seeing that tree, then the camera will see that tree. You know, if you are
Visualization.
not seeing it, you are not. And how you will develop that, what is the basis or the foundation for developing you being able to see that tree, is to really observe that tree. So just developing your basics and making them strong, which I think is in any profession. If you are an engineer or if you're a painter or if you're in any profession, the more you work on your basic foundations and develop that strong, then you will become, and you will be able to grasp any technique. Now, if you don't know your basics, then just using a technique or learning a technique is just theory. That's why a lot of students find it very difficult to apply very effectively the Chekov technique sometimes, or Stanislavski, or any technique, because a technique is something where it assumes that your foundations are in place. But today's sometimes a lot of the instant generation that we are in is we don't have time enough that we want to work on our basics. But if we do that well, then you can grow that much more.
That's laying the foundation
Foundations.
for a
Like
long
for a
race.
building, if you have a strong foundation, फिर वो हिलाने को difficult है. And you will grow longer. You will develop longer.
I think the perception is generally acting is like trying to be someone different,
Yes.
but not finding the similarity between what is different.
So the challenge of acting is first to be able to find out what is yourself, and then what is common and discommon in, what is similar and different in the character, and then to be able to reach a point where you've gone beyond yourself and you've become that character. And to be able to do that is not, I think, an ordinary task to do.
So now let's talk about your filmmaking journey.
Okay.
When and where did you start?
All right. So I was part of the company, and therefore I was researching, directing, and producing films. But my independent journey of making films really started when, in 2011, my dad encouraged me, inspired me, pushed me to make my first short film, because he said, "You'll never be ready unless I push you into the water. You'll never learn to swim. So please go." So I made my first short film, which was called Mamaiji, which is basically, as I'm a Parsi, so we call my maternal grandmother is Mamaiji. Now, the whole journey of why and how I happened to make my first short film on my grandmother is that I was asking myself that if I want to make a film as an artist, then what is it that I can say that is a little unique to, what others are saying or making? Having said that, there is nothing really completely original, because I think we are all building on each other's work. And I'm not the only Parsi on this planet. But at the same time, I felt that the closer I go to my world, so if it is my dream, or it is my grandmother, or it is my mother, then I think I come closer to being unique, at least to some extent, and authentic as an artist, compared to, say, if I take the laborer or the working class, which I have not got any immediate interaction with, and I'm then just taking borrowed knowledge of something that I've read, something that I've heard. So for me, it was very important that how do I make a film which is very something that I know and something that is close to me, which I can share with the world. So while I was exploring that, my grandmother's character came to my mind, and I thought that she symbolized and represented two very important things. One is that she represented the archetype of a grandmother, which I think is a very universal concept. And everybody, even now, when I show the film and they see it, they think, okay, they become nostalgic, my grandmother. And even though it's my grandmother's story, they still connect to the concept of a grandmother, and a grandmother selflessly caring, or a grandmother singing a lullaby, and all those aspects. And second is, I felt that she was a very powerful character. Her voice itself, the way she dressed, her background, that she came from Iran, she taught herself. There was so much of a feminism in her, and everything that she represented was a very unique character. So I thought that, yes, that is something that I want to bring to life. And what's interesting is that I realized only one day before I was going to shoot the film that she told me that she wanted a film to be made on her. And I found that so endearing. Okay, here I am as a granddaughter making a film, and she had a desire or a wish for a film to be made on her. So that was very beautiful. And what I discovered also in the process is that film is so much about, therefore, the extraordinary in the ordinary. So she was not a celebrity. She was not somebody who was, very famous.
Mm.
But in her being ordinary and just being my grandmother, there was such an extraordinary power to her,
Mhm.
that which reflected, and I think in everybody's lives, just being a woman and living your life, just being able to survive childbirth, just being able to nurture your children selflessly. All these are great successes which we take for
Yes.
granted. And I think that was a very beautiful part of that exploration that I was doing, which was maybe something that I didn't think of as a starting point. But as I worked with it, as I think about it today, that's something that I really want to highlight.
Mm.
And in our everyday interactions, uh, in these beautiful moments, there is so much art that is created. So I was recently listening back to this beginning of my film, which is basically where my grandmother sings me a lullaby. And if I can just say it in a few
Yeah, yeah,
words,
sure.
I'm not saying it in the original language of Gujarati, but I'll say it in English. So she says that I'm a very good girl, and she's giving me a bath on her feet, which is a very dear image of my childhood, because growing up in the holidays when we used to go to Nasik and her garden and those roses and, the beautiful space all around, very humble dwelling, but very charming and beautiful. So she says that I'm lying on her feet. She's giving me a bath. Then I climb the jasmine tree, the mogra tree. I sing and the flowers bloom. And then my grandfather makes a garland of those flowers, offers it to God, and asks for blessings for me.
Mhm.
So I'm sure just like this, there are so many grandmothers,
Yeah.
singing these beautiful songs, which are so poetic, which are art in
Yes,
themselves.
yes.
So the journey of making a film on my grandmother was highlighting a story of one woman's journey,
Mm.
which had, I think, a lot of layers to it. I didn't start off it by being like a woman's voice and all that, but the more I think about it, it was a very powerful voice. And
Mm.
when people see it today, I think they identify with that.
Yeah.
So one thing that she says is, when her actual biological mother died giving birth, and she had therefore was in the house with a stepmom, and her stepmom did not allow her to continue her education. So she went for some time, and then she was at a second or third standard, she was removed. But she said she got a double promotion. And
Mhm.
she had health issues, she had problems with her eyesight, various things, but she was so clever that she got a double promotion. I mean, double promotion is that you could finish that year, 2 years in 1 year. But she was not allowed to take her education forward. And that speaks about, say, the rights of women at that time. And but she lived her life, and maybe she didn't get the opportunity to become a professional, but she did equal justice to her own life. She learned 3 languages on her own with her husband, so she could read and write Gujarati, Hindi, and also English. So she lived
Yeah.
her life, and I
Yeah.
think that was a beautiful life.
Yes. Sounds very simple, but yet inspirational,
Yeah.
dearly, and lovely. It invokes that emotion from
And it,
anyone who watches.
yeah, and it reminds me of Satyajit Ray, one of the
Mhm.
directors I am inspired by, that the beauty is in the small moments, not in
Mm.
the great climaxes. So, yes,
Yes.
getting married, dying, giving birth are very
Mhm.
beautiful and significant moments. But
Mhm.
sometimes those memorable moments are also in those everyday moments
Yes,
that we
yes,
live.
very true, very
Yeah.
true. So, a lot of your work actually seems to be very deeply rooted in culture
Yeah.
and the essence of the community that you
Mm.
belong to.
Yeah.
Path of Zarathustra is one example.
Yes.
Yeah, can you explain how did you get into so deeply rooted into your
Yeah.
culture?
So I am not a very religious person. I am not somebody who's like very, very Parsi in that sense. But yes, I am very fond of my community, my religion, very close to it. So I might not be very religious in the sense of, say, doing a lot of rituals, but I go with the very basic ethos and principles and values of what the religion stands by. And I deeply am a spiritual person. So I kind of identify with it from that point of view. Now, the Path of Zarathustra was my main debut as a feature film
Mhm.
maker, and that was my major film that I made, which was in fact a PVR director's rare gradually as it evolved because it was made in stages. The initial idea was actually, the germ of the idea was when I attended the Minority Commission meet in 2006, and I was made aware of the dwindling number of the Parsis. So at that time it was 69,000. And I was like, okay. And then in 2011, in fact, further went down to 57,000. Now it must be, I think, in the range of 50,000. But way back then, where the germ of the idea was sown in my head, because I said, okay, here is a community which is now not going to exist soon, is becoming, sparse and is dwindling. So who were we really? And besides me thinking about it deeper, I think there is a reason for the world to know about it before we completely disappear. So that was the initial germ of the idea. And then I discussed with my dad and with Farooq Dhondi, who's a good friend of my dad and the erstwhile commissioning editor of Channel 4, for which we worked with and collaborated with for a lot of projects. So he came on board and he wrote the script, the screenplay for the film. And a great contribution, I think, of Farooq was to bring these three heretical characters of Mani, Mazdak, and Zurwan from the ancient Zoroastrian past. And Zurwan was the concept of time. He was from the theology of the past, mostly from the Sasanian times. And Mani and Mazdak were heretics, which were from the Sasanian times. Now, when I say heretics, they were part of, so just to go back to history, we see that now we're a dwindling community, like inside 150,000. But even worldwide, say around 100,000, not many Parsis, even if we talk of the worldwide population. But way back in the Achaemenid Empire and the Sasanian Empire, we were the state religion. So the entire community was thriving, right? And we had Zoroastrianism that was in Persia. That was huge. From that time to now, why we have come to that, how we can improve that, what is the current situation of the Parsi community, the whole concept of the traditionalists versus the progressives or the radicalists, the way you want to look at it. That was one exploration in the film. But bringing these unknown historical characters who are heretics. Heretics are people who are not really in the orthodoxy or in the ruling class, but they are somebody who challenges that, or there have been people in the orthodoxy who have struck them out or who have killed them. But they represent an interesting layer that comes into the film. So Zarathustra actually is the name of our prophet. So if you look at the title, you might feel it's the story of the prophet. It's not. It's basically the story of the religion. It's the story of this community. And as Tom Alter, who is a very significant part of the film, late Tom Alter, he puts it, he says it's a love story. Because the film at so many levels is about exploring love, about finding love, and the whole concept of who is God, what is God, and humanism and love is at the essence of any religion or anything which is aspiring to be of that kind. Where unfortunately, in today's world, we have in so many religions, we have power, we have greed, we have ritual, we have superficial things that have taken over the fundamental basics. The fundamental basics of any religion is evolution, is about humanism, is about love for each other. But so many other dimensions have overridden that to kind of take center stage. So Path of Zarathustra was about exploring in its realm of, in the genre of magic realism. It was trying to bring together the past, the present, and explore what really is religion, who really is God, and who is this Parsi community. But through this one religion and one community, it was exploring deeper questions about religion itself, about love itself, about the orthodoxy, and what we need to do today. Like there are so many traditions which are, let's say, if we talk about this custom which was raised in the film, that if a woman, Parsi woman, marries somebody from the outside community, her child cannot become a Parsi. So this is completely playing by patriarchal rules, is playing by something that in today's times should be questioned. It's talking about a tradition that is not based on equality. So we have Mazdak, who is in fact could be considered one of the early communist or the sociologist from that point of view, who kind of really stressed and stood for equality of the sexes, of wealth, of the classes, of various things. So he comes into contemporary times. So the film is happening in contemporary spaces, in contemporary times, and he brings in and he suggests, in the realm of the genre, he suggests a solution to the dwindling numbers, which is debatable by some, but there therefore brings in, it's basically not answers that the film is giving, but it's trying to explore questions. It's trying to raise questions about things. It's like when we talk about the whole ritual or the orthodoxy tradition that we have of the Parsis, of the Dungarwadi, that is the Tower of Silence, where we offer our bodies to the vultures, which is a great act of philanthropy in that sense, which is a great act of giving and going back to nature. And also, it is something that was done in the ancient times. The Tibetans used to do it, on the, when you are in nature, you give it. But if the vultures are in scarcity, if the bodies are not getting decomposed, then do we hold on to that tradition itself? Or do we adopt technology? Do we adopt electric cremation? Do we adopt modern means? So are we just holding on to the skeleton of something which represented something, and forgetting about the ethos and the more important thing of what a religion tells you? Is some of the questions that the film was exploring.
Yeah, I learned about this when I went to Singapore.
Okay.
There's a museum called Museum of Hell,
Uh-huh.
where they go through all the religions, how deads are celebrated in all the religions, where this vulture
Okay.
part is where it was covered in Zoroastrianism and other cultures from
Right.
the ancient times.
Right.
Yeah. So about the Parsi community,
Mm.
though the numbers are very small, but
Yeah.
still they have a huge cultural impact in India, and the perception is that very liberal community
Mhm.
as well. So, what is one value system of Parsi community that, if you have to describe its essence briefly?
Okay. I think a very important aspect of the identity of a Parsi is the religion itself. So Zoroastrianism and the religion brings a very interesting dynamics to the religion, to the Parsi. And a very important part of, therefore, what Zoroastrianism brings is ethics. And Zarathustra represented one of the, I think, the pioneering figures who represented ethics and the right thing to do for the right sake of right, not because of anything else. So we have a beautiful prayer, in fact, which is there, part of my first film, Mamaiji, which is called Ashem Vahu. And that, if I translate it, is basically about doing the right for the sake of righteousness, for because it is right, period. It's not about gaining anything. It's not about all that, So the concept of ethics, and therefore then the aspect of honesty, the aspect of philanthropy related to that, etc., are things I think that are very central to the identity of a Parsi. And I think the Parsi community has also been the native elite. So when the Britishers were building Bombay, we had, because of our language preferences, because of not being the very local people, we had certain advantages, or we were positioned ourselves in a particular way with the Britishers and with the ruling class at that time, that we were in a position to build and pioneer a lot of industries and a lot of what Bombay is today.
Yeah.
And very proud of that. Having said that, I don't think that, like any other community, the Parsis have only one dimension to them. Every human being, every history
Yeah.
has different shades and shadows to it. So we have a history of being part of the opium trade with the Britishers or with the Chinese, and that is part of a reason for a lot of the wealth that we have got created, which then went into very positive causes.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes when you talk about a Parsi, there is only this very goody, बहुत ही honest है, बहुत ही साफ सुथरा है, he's like made of white and milk. That is not true. So I'm very proud. I'm very close to, and I'm very fond of my community and my religion. And I think there's a lot that the world can learn from it. A very simple, if I have to distill it down to a very simple, basic message that the community, that the religion has, is good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And you could look at it very superficially and say that ये तो क्या है, बहुत ही simple है. But if you look at it from the point of view of psychology and spirituality, it's very deep
It's very
because
deep.
it
Yeah.
all starts with that thought.
Yes.
So even before you go to the deed and you go to the act, it's that thought that
Yes.
is very important. And it's also something that my dad really instilled in me, that it's the power of the idea, because it's the idea, and then the world can be destroyed, or there can be the coming of a new age, or the coming of a product to be made, or anything for that matter. So the power of an idea and a thought, I think, is very critical.
Also, the Parsi humor, it's very subtle and very observational.
And that they can laugh on themselves. That's very important. So yeah, fun loving, and the whole concept of also our food and our culture, and that our food and culture is very also related to a coming of the Parsis in India. So in the 8th, 10th century, when we came to India, we came to Gujarat. So a lot of our customs, our rituals, our way of dressing, our food was kind of mixed with our Persian roots and combined with, the Gujarati culture that existed in India.
Got it. So coming back to acting,
Yeah.
so what is it that theaters do, or the whole ecosystem of theaters, that actors, I have heard that and seen that they give a lot of credit to their time in the theaters that the mainstream cinema misses generally.
Okay. So I think even in Whistling Woods, when I was part of heading the department of acting, our tradition has been, and I think that's a very beautiful tradition, that theater develops the foundation or the instrument of the actor. And that's why it's very important. So, yes, the medium is different in the sense of it's live, and you have usually, you don't have a camera that's up front close to your face, right? So you might not get so much of those nuances of, say, your pupil opening and things like that. But when you do theater, you get a thorough work on your instrument. So if you are training for being able to work with, say, 1 hour of dialogues, then 1 minute becomes easy, right?
Yeah.
If you are working on larger than life and opening up your body, then subtle also is something that can be accommodated. So there are a lot of advantages of working even with a stylized form or working with folk theater. So when we make our students do folk theater, or when we make them do coloring, it doesn't mean that we are expecting that they'll go and do that outside necessarily. They might take that up, but that's not the end goal. It's a means to an end, because it opens up your body in a particular way. When you do something which is larger than life, it opens you up in a particular way, and then you are able to then even deal with the subtler forms. So theater, I think, is a grounding, because it involves you more completely, and because there's more of a discipline to that. People who are involved in theater are more process oriented than commercial or outcome oriented. I think it works in developing the instrument of the actor, and the spirit of art is something that gets developed in you. So you basically, from a practical point of view, you are working with your body, your voice, and everything for that longer duration, for a more rigorous approach. Also, you are just getting that one take. You can't, like cinema, have a retake. So you have to be that much more thorough. You can't, fumble and, say, second retake. So that's why the thoroughness, it develops the instrument. And then it's just about being able to tone that down. It's, if I can scream and say the same thing, then I have to just be a little more aware, which I think in today's times is not something very complicated, to be able to tone down and to know, okay, this is the frame. So I work in those parameters rather than, having to project myself. So as far as if you can get the medium right and understand those dynamics, then I think theater really helps to develop you as a foundation.
What are some performances, especially in Bollywood, that you look up to and say that in terms of craft, not in terms of popularity, that this is what teaches a lot about acting and have utilized many of the techniques that you teach?
No, but that's very difficult to say. That's a question putting
Not
me on
many.
the spot. No, it's injustice to say that not many. There are some great performances. There's some beautiful performances. I would go back to Veena Kumari. I loved the depth that her eyes had. I loved the lyrics and the songs of Sahil Ludhianvi, Guru Dutt songs. So I felt that had a depth of its own. Having said that, I enjoy some performances even today. Some filmmakers like Sanjay Leela Bansali, Anurag Kashyap, Ram Reddy, there are quite a few interesting directors and sensibilities coming across. But to be able to point out a particular film as like a master class in performance right now, I don't think I can do justice to that.
But don't they show in the drama schools that hey, this is a movie that let's watch these movies and then decode?
Yeah, so you can always take contemporary examples of that, or you can take historical examples of that. But I've never really felt a film of that sort which can say belong to the contemporary times that brings that to focus. But if I have to talk about my personal preference, then I love the performance of Giulietta Messina, who is the wife of Fellini, Federico Fellini, Italian director. And there's a film La Strada, which is translated as The Road. And her performance in that film, every scene is like a masterclass for me. Now, it is not the complete psychological realism. It has got a hint of stylization because she's the epitome for me of an innocent character. And the second time I saw the film, where I was going to teach it, I had tears in my eyes, and it really stayed with me even today. So yes, she is one person, for example, whose film or whose scenes, there are not maybe too many dialogues, but how she plays with. So there's this one restaurant scene in that film which I analyze with some of the students, and we see that how every little expression of hers is got a combination of so many emotions, and how she can convey so much just with her face. No dialogues, and just with her eyes, and that purity of that. So I think there are great performances like that. Even I think Charlie Chaplin is a great craftsman, and that combination of how his body and his face combine together to do something. Iranian New Wave cinema is again another favorite, where I had seen a few years ago the film The Death of a Salesman by Asghar Farhadi. And the end of that film, I don't remember the names of the actors per se, or that person who was playing that character offhand, but he was again a common, not a big star, right? It doesn't have to be a big star who really touches you. But it can be, like Giulietta Messina was a brilliant performer herself. But even an actor who is just truthful, and the way that story was written, it had me in tears because of not so much the melodrama of the performance, but the irony of human nature about the position that that character was in. So I think many times it's about how great the writing is, and the actor is the last draft, is the final draft. So sometimes I think that's what, and of course you have Meryl Streep, who's a great performer. So Sophie's Choice, or many of her films that could be taken as a textbook example. You have Anthony Hopkins. So you have many films.
What's so special about the movie Godfather? I always have wondered.
Okay. Godfather is basically the gangster genre, so is not the top favorite in my realm. But I think Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and so many of these directors, what is special about them is that even in the mainstream, they have managed to not do the conventional, typical formula-driven films. Star-driven films. They might use stars, they will use stars, but they will take the story and the stars and make you experience something which is artistic, which is cinematic. And many times it is born out of something that has a root in their life or their experience or their upbringing or something that they have brought, that they know about, rather than just a superficial experience of something that they want to share. So I think films like The Godfather are great because they, at all levels of filmmaking, like right from the cinematography, there is so much detail that his eyes are kept in the shadow, and the cinematographer has done that intentionally because it is symbolizing and creating a particular kind of character where they want to reveal the mystery that is seen because his eyes are not seen. There is that body language that is being seen of that character in such a way that towards the end of the film he's become an epitome of that character of the Godfather when he takes that role. So I think there's a beautiful scene, in fact, where Al Pacino was there in the first part of Godfather, where he is just about to eat in the restaurant, when he's just about to shoot that
Lovely
the
scene.
cop and that gangster, and he doesn't say one word. It's just the movement of his eyes and the sound of that train, and it's so powerful.
Yes.
And he was not a big star at that time. I think it was one of his first few major films that he was doing, and the director was very keen that he do that film. And the truth in that, and the minimalism sometimes in how you can convey something. And even when you talk about Marlon Brando and the taxi driver, the unconventional choices. So he pulls out his brother in that scene pulls out the gun, and rather than reacting in a very loud, bombastic fashion, he deals with that whole scene in like a love affair, like a very subtle relationship between, Are ye kya? And there's so much pathos in it. There's so much truth of that emotion that is there in that. So I think when performances and all the processes of filmmaking in a particular film are working at that level, headed by the director who has a vision and who is monitoring all those processes, you get a great film.
They also say that films are a director's medium, not an actor's medium.
Yes. The actor doesn't have full control. I wouldn't say it's not the actor's medium, but you're right in saying because it's not he doesn't have the full control. So like in theater, he has a direct access to the audience. But here, the cameraman, the lighting, the director, the editor, they will all make his performance. His performance is not in direct access to the audience. So the medium is basically shaping his performance. So in fact, it can go in his favor. You can take one take from here, one shot from there, and make the entire scene, which can go in his favor. The editor will cut his pause just before or after something where he did something silly, which on stage could not be managed, and the entire scene would go. But an editor can really save his performance or make a brilliant performance. The lens that you use can really make maybe a character or an actress look very glamorous or very character driven for that scene, which probably could not be done in theater. So I would not say it's not an actor's medium, but yeah, the actor doesn't have direct access to the audience in relation to that. And a lot of people in between who can change that, who can influence and shape the performance.
Yeah.
But yes, ideally, a director has a vision for all the aspects of filmmaking. And since if they are involved, then that's why that vision shapes the entire film.
So you have met Charles Sobraj in person. Let's talk about that. And the recent movie is also one Manoj Bajpayee's, and then you have Randeep Huda's. So how was Charles Sobraj?
Okay, let me not talk about the movies, but let me talk about the man himself. It's very interesting that way back when my dad had been planning to make a film, and Farooq Dhondi introduced us to him. First time my dad was going to meet him in London, I was very apprehensive. I said, be careful.
So this was in London, not in India.
Yeah,
okay.
No. And I was like, what if he mixes poison in your cup and, be careful. And dad is like, chill. Why will he do that? I mean, I'm going to make a film on him, first of all.
How old were
makes
you
sense. Then? I don't remember the exact age, but I think I was past college or something.
Okay.
And so when dad went to meet him for this initial meeting, he had a meeting, there was some initial talks, went well and came back. And in fact, we had Amir Khan, who we wanted to cast. And then later on, we had Jackie Shroff. But for various reasons, which I don't want to discuss here, it didn't work out. But what was really interesting was meeting the man himself. And when I met him second time, when I went with dad, the charm, I think, of Charles was that he made you feel at ease. He made you feel that, you're his uncle or you're his relative. He didn't have that, which I think a lot of people who are not the typical psycho criminals have that. They have a charm to themselves, and that charm is of making you forget that you're in the presence of somebody so dangerous. Also, I think when I met him, he was not at his prime of being that dangerous a man, but there was a history that he had. And sometimes in his presence, I tended to forget that he has crossed the line and, killed people. And but that was very revealing as a human emotion, that when you are in the presence of a human being, what are the dynamics that come around? How does it work? What do you feel? So there was this aspect of Charles also, that yes, he's very sharp and he has all those dimensions, but he also used to lose himself on the roads in London, and there was that human part of him, and there was this one night, in fact, where we had to spend time together, and there were his two wives. One was Chantal and one was a Vietnamese wife. And they were both literally competing to want to spend time with us, and how he was managing them like any husband would manage two wives, And then one day I remember that when I woke up and I saw him and Chantal, I think you know about the history of Chantal and him. And she represents a very cultured, cultural background compared to, the story that they had, or what you would imagine of a serial killer. And I woke up to this moment that they were sharing as two human beings, which was not sexual, which was just emotional, which was just there, being there in the presence. So yes, I don't think I forgive him at all, being the criminal that he is and what he has done as actions. But it just makes me also think about the human dimension and different aspects of life and of human nature, and makes you think a little more deeply on that. So, but I think it was a great experience to be able to have the privilege to meet somebody of a world which you don't normally live in or are part of.
Yeah, and the movies that were made on him, if you see, they're very different to each other. Be it the Randeep Huda's one, very different from what recently we saw, and then the series Serpent, many other movies, very contrasting to each other, how they have depicted him.
Yeah, and I also think that none of the films have really gone deeply into the character and explored the depth of that character from the dynamics of the human nature. Because when you take a person like this, it's not only the sensationalization of the story and the events and what
But
was
different
in the.
shades.
And if you don't go beyond what was in the headlines, if you don't dwell on that deeper, then I think you're not doing justice enough to taking a character like this, because there's an innumerable number of films that have been, and
Yes,
that
yes.
he has very cleverly used.
Yes, yes, yes. The
And
Bikini
made
Killer
money
and
out of
this and
that.
that and
Yeah.
all. Very true.
So there's still lots more that can be done on Charles.
And the man who did very recently, let's talk about him, Manoj Bajpayee. How do you see his character and his portrayal in different films? I'm talking because he's my favorite.
Okay.
So, how do you see?
Manoj has been there in the industry, has been there with his craft for a lot of time. I have respect for him as an actor. Specifically about that character and that film, I would avoid
Yeah, sure.
diving very deeply into. But it was a fun portrayal that he did of that character. But as I said, that beyond the headline of that character and the dynamics between him and Charles was not something that I think even the series or the film wanted to explore.
Yeah.
It was more about bringing to life this character and his peculiar trait, and not being a typical cop, which was nice, which was a nice touch to the entire thing.
No, I was talking about like Manoj's the craft of acting
Yeah.
since the days of Sool and Satya to till now.
Correct.
Clearly one of the best in our industry.
Yeah. And I think that when an actor works for so many years with their craft, there are certain things that they are realizing about themselves. They have, like, say, an engineer or a doctor or anybody from any profession is working day in and day out with their craft. They have developed a way of, and they're stuck by it, and they are successful, and they are being appreciated, and they're enjoying the process. I think if you're enjoying the process, then you're growing. And if you take like a few years ago, I seen Naseruddin Shah on stage at this age, every second he was alive on stage, And as I said, that therefore somebody like a Manoj or a Nasir, they are just picking up a cup or they're just getting up and walking. But that is like you just want to sit there and look at them. And that's because of the truth that they're so involved in the process. It's not just the outcome. And I think if any artist is so dedicated and working towards their process, then over the years, that beauty and that charisma that they have will attract people. Again, it depends that if you are performing in a stylized form, or if you're performing in melodrama, or you're performing in psychological realism. And a lot of these actors, I think, have that craft also of being able to adopt to a particular situation or adapt to a particular scene or a character. So I'm sure Manoj can play a over the top character also, and yet he can play a very subtle, minute character and have beauty in that. So it's about that presence. So when I visited Venuji for the Navrasa Sadhana workshop in Kerala, I had the privilege of doing that. I was introduced by our colleague Sonali Bharadwaj. What really struck me when he mentioned this concept that not that I did not know, but that he said that for the Natya Sashtra, for the Indian tradition, Nataraja, Shiva, is the ideal actor. And I said, oh, yes. And what does that mean? An actor, normally in Indian context, we're always talking about glamour, entertainment, entertainer hai. But here is a tradition where we come from, where we are talking about an actor as God. Now, what does that really mean? Therefore, it's about being so powerful. So, and if you admire Manoj, then it's about his power of being able to transport you, of his presence.
Yeah, very
so
true.
the whole training of an actor, or the difference between a mediocre actor and a real actor, a truthful actor, a successful actor, I'm not saying commercially only, but if he's admired by somebody, is that he is so present. And that presence is visible in his eyes, so much so more than anything else, but his entire body, his entire stance, and his presence as in that reality. So if that character is, dying, then he is dying because he is in that presence of that truth. And I think that will always remain with me, that, an actor is, in the Indian tradition, is God, is Nataraj, is so powerful. And we talk about just an entertainer. No, an actor as an artist can be so powerful that he can transport you to a make you empathize, take you into that world of the idea, into that problem, into that solution, and make you maybe convince you of a particular reality, and change the world, because he's belonging to the world of art.
Yeah, invoke so many different kind of emotions in you as an audience.
And depending on what that film wants to do, make you want to do something. Or if you're talking about, so when we talk about acting, again, there are so many schools of acting. Yes, there is most or majority of performances which we see which are narrative driven. But there are also practitioners like Grotowski, Artaud, who are interested in removing everything to do with the story. And you come back to performance just as actor. And it's that human instrument and what he can convey to you and what he can do and how powerful that can do something in you. It's like when we talk about abstract art. Abstract art doesn't have a story or a narrative. But if you talk about, artists who just paint, say, a particular one color, and then, of course, there are layers to it, and there is so much to that transparency and all. But superficially, if you look at it, it's just one color, right? But that one color has made people, a common man, go into the art gallery and cry in tears just by looking at that one color. So if art is really something that is powerful, then it doesn't have to be a story. It doesn't have to be entertainment. So I would say that as an actor, since we're talking about acting and filmmaking, we're talking about it being an industry, it being commerce, it being entertainment. That is one road, right? And another road is where filmmaking, a director and an actor belongs to art. And art is not some mumbo jumbo, but art is, I think, what makes us really human. because we have, as human beings, I really question that how much have we evolved? Yes, we have evolved. We've got a justice system. We are not as might as right that used to exist, but we are might as right in a different way now. I think more people who have money are might as right. So how much have we really evolved in that sense? So, yeah, we dress better. Maybe we have our fashion sense that is better, but some of it is a little more superficial. I think I would like to see that how art can change a little more of that evolution that happens inside us. So we really actualize the human birth that we have. And what's very tragic is also that if we look at the climate situation and we compare that with the progress of man, if we look at industrial revolution, if we look at, I'm sure you would look as traveling by plane, a progress compared to going on a bullock cart. But now if you look at it from the climate point of view,
Yeah.
it's bad to fly. Go in the bullock cart, walk. That's much better. So all our past, the industrial revolution is all going against us as a
Yes.
society. So how much are we really progressing? I think is a question we need to ask ourselves.
Regressing in a way.
Or then have that right balance when we have gone ahead, and now what we need to do to go back to that, because we've gone beyond the balance.
What do you think are some stories that are missing from the mainstream cinema, or from the point of view of evolution of storytelling in Indian cinema, that is missing when you compare it globally at large?
So missing, I don't think it's really missing, because there are so many industries and so many cinemas. There's so much of regional cinema. I'm maybe not using the most respectable term to it, but to put it very simply, there are so many languages and there are so many cinemas. And all those cinemas are doing great work. And I think exploring so many of these different storytelling modes, methods. There are young filmmakers who are trying to bridge the gap between AI and the Adivasi community, like Aranya, Saha. So we have a lot of, I think, this that is going on in various. It's only when we look at the Hindi cinema, or if we look at only one kind of cinema, probably, where I could say it's lacking. But if we look at the different languages and different cinemas of India, I think there's a great lot of wealth in the issues, in the style of performance, way of storytelling that it kind of tackles. So I don't think I'm in a position to really say that lacking completely.
Yet to come, maybe.
But there is always, of course, more scope for everything. I think there's great work being done, and the wheel is being reinvented. I, in my own small way, am going back to the basics. So when I made my film Anahita's Law, I chose to make the entire film in close-up. And the purpose of doing that was to go back to, what if I don't have that entire grammar that has been developed over the ages? I can still tell a story. What is Iranian New Wave doing? When they make the choice of, shooting an entire film, let's say, just with one block lens inside the car, not that they don't know that they can do a long shot and they can do fancy movement and crane and all that, but they choose to go back to the very basics of filmmaking. And going back to the basics, I think, of any art form also can help you to rediscover, a different way of filmmaking or a different art.
Yeah, indeed.
In that sense.
So let's talk about your teaching journey.
So I have been teaching independent workshops. I've been teaching in various institutions like FTI. I've also taken an acting module in the Russian Center. But I think my continuous journey of teaching with filmmaking has been with the International Baccalaureate School, where I think for 15 years now I've been teaching film. And I think if I take this opportunity to talk about teaching per se, I think teaching is so much so more today because of the internet and Google Mata, where teaching is not about facts. It's not about just giving information about your subject to the student, but it's about perspective. It's about how you draw the attention to what is important. It is how you give a perspective on a particular subject, and then they kind of, go into the facts, etc. Teaching is also, I think, so much about nurturing that spirit And it's also so much about an emotional nurturing that takes place, because after the family, I think, and sometimes maybe students don't have the best families or the upbringing that they can have due to various reasons.
Yeah.
So the teacher is the second mother or the father.
Mm.
And the teacher, I think, or being a teacher is really having a noble profession, like a
Yeah.
doctor. We very rarely talk about what an important role a teacher can play to create the future generation,
Yes.
to create the next, how the next world is going to be, the next generation of human beings, and the shape of the new generation is going to be. And giving a little more value and importance to, therefore, the teacher and the educational system, where the educational system is not only interested in a career, because now many times we're our priority is the student, the teacher, the whole institution is about ye livelihood kaise banayega, right? But even in today's society, where supposedly we've evolved, there is so much of mental health issues. There's so much of anxiety. There's so much of depression. There are so many successful people in all fields who are earning a great livelihood, but they're not living happy lives, or they are not self-actualized as emotionally, spiritually. So I feel that a little more self-reflection on that kind of system that can take place. I think I have also been involved with teaching and being involved with the International Baccalaureate Board, because I identify with the core spirit of the board, where it's about the student being at the center of learning. And I think education is not about just giving them information about, for me, for example, if I'm teaching about filmmaking, it's not about just telling them कि तुम्हें कैमरा ऐसा पकड़ना है या तुम्हें स्क्रिप्ट का ये ग्रामर है. It's not about the craft, but it's about two things for me as filmmaking. One, it's about making them find their own voice as artists, as filmmakers. कि the first thing an amateur filmmaker wants to do is कि सुना है, पढ़ा है, वो बना दे. Correct? It's an imitation. But my journey has always been that how do I make them genuine artists? How do I make them find what is it that they want to say?
They are lost in the beginning.
What is it that they want to say? But because it's lazy, na, you're lazy, right? It's not easy to come up with an original thinking. But slowly and gradually, we come up with your own voice. So that is my journey of trying to create artists and trying to make them find their voice. And then, of course, the language of cinema that exists. So I think that my pet name is self-actualizing. I always kind of push them to self-actualize and to bring up the best that they can as artists, and in discipline or in various fields that they are working. Coming back to the IB curriculum and the spirit with which IB was born. So we're talking about a period of, say, 1968, where the International Baccalaureate Board, a lot of people came together, like-minded people. And John Gurmukh was one of them, a prominent president of that association, where the formalization happened, where he, interestingly, had gone to the concentration camp during the Second World War.
No.
And he's coming from a space where he wanted to, and like-minded people wanted to create a world with more empathy, where people understand different perspectives. We're living in a connected global world where cultural differences, perspectives are understood. So yes, there was a practical concept of children of diplomats. If they're traveling in different countries, they require like a common board. But another very important aspect of the board that I really align with, and I think is very important, is that it's talking about the student being at the center of education, and it's talking about developing skills, learning skills, and teaching skills. So when we're talking about learning skills, the student, we're not only interested in the subject, but I take it more seriously. Maybe some teachers or students don't. But for me, I think it's really beautiful that you're not just teaching the subject, but you're teaching the student thinking skills. You're teaching them critical thinking. You're teaching them creative thinking. You're teaching them social skills. You're teaching them how to work together as a team. You're teaching them self-management skills, research skills. As a teacher, you're interested in skills of how do you teach with inquiry? How do you teach with conceptual learning? How do you teach with, of course, assessment, but also how do you teach where they learn as a group and they're developing those skills? So I think teaching, I think I'm very fortunate and blessed to be in a profession where I can make a difference. Teaching came to me by default, but I think I grabbed it with both hands because what it did for me was it helped me to make a very meaningful impact. So I think I feel there is something original that I can share, and where I can help that other person to kind of bring the best out of them. So teaching, I think, worked in that way.
Yeah,
to
in
the
a way,
best.
you are shaping and building their personality.
Yeah. Helping them find their own answers. They have their answers. It's not giving them the answer, but it's about helping them to find their own answers. And having said all these great things, it is not that every day is, this very beautiful day. Not There are days and periods when it's very stressful, where you're just running behind them, where you're like, क्या कर रहे हो यार, क्यों नहीं कर रहे हो? You all are breaking deadlines, you all are not, there are challenging times. But then there are also those very beautiful times where, that one thing that you said that has made a difference after 20 years, after 5 years, 10 years down the line, when they come and tell you, okay, आपने ये बोला था और ये मैंने ये choice लिया and my whole life changed because of that.
So, what are some common mistakes that actors do when they prepare for auditions?
So I think auditions is basically, what are they looking for in an audition? In an audition, they are looking for two things. One is that if you fit that character. So one is, I would say that if an actor, an amateur actor is going, or a trained actor is going for an audition, and if they don't get the role, please do not feel bad. Don't take it personally, because it's not about you. It's basically about a particular character that they're looking for, and you don't fit that bill. As simple as that, right? That's one aspect. Second aspect is that sometimes doesn't matter if you don't fit the bill, if you don't fit that personality, which is your personality that you're coming with. But if you prove yourself to be a great actor, right? And you prove that raw talent of yours, raw trained talent of yours, then many times the director will keep you in mind for another role. So when you're going for an audition, basically what you're achieving to do is that you want to be as truthful that you can and as unique as you can in that, because there will be, say, 500 people applying for that, right? Now you will do, if you do something that everybody that is expected in that role will do, then you will not be really noticed. But if there is that slightly unusual choice that you make, which is not gimmicky, which is not just doing it for the sake of doing it,
Little
right?
unique.
But is unique, and that uniqueness will come when you kind of go a little deeper into exploring that character for yourself, when you bring your truth to that character, when you don't do it as an imitation of another character or another actor that you've seen or some script that you've read, right? But you bring your originality, your presence, yourself into it, right? And second is being alive in that space. Yes, you will face many challenges. You might have an assistant director who is a boy and he's going to pose as a girl and say some dialogues to you and you have to respond. But then that's where your magic is, where you worked on your foundation, where you can completely go into that zone, where you are in your imagination. That is your complete truth. And that's the space from which you perform. So if your foundations are good and you don't become conscious and you don't become inhibited and you are in the zone, so the advice would be in your zone and bring your individuality and your truthfulness to that audition. And if you don't get that role, you might get a role later on.
Any words of encouragement or advice to aspiring filmmakers, especially?
To filmmakers, I would say that today we are in an age where we have technology, we have AI, which is some filmmakers or some artists are threatened by. But I would say that as a human component, as a creator, our value will always remain, because as far as, and that's why, therefore, we need to nurture that. As far as we have something as our lived experience that we bring to that work of art, which reaches the audience, something which is mine, something which is from my dream, something which is from my sorrow, which is from my joy, from my experiences, and what has life taught me. So I think more the reason to be original, to be, when I say original, it's about being truthful to your lived experience, to your self awareness, to your evolution as wherever you are. Just being truthful to yourself. And rather than wanting to ape or imitate anybody else, be yourself, however you are. That's what is beautiful. That's what is, I think, where the magic is.
I think one major takeaway for me, what I understood from this conversation is not to imitate, not to pretend, but
Yeah.
more of originality
And be yourself.
and be yourself.
And therefore discover yourself and self awareness.
Yes. And all this you, of course, you teach in acting schools. So it's an absolute privilege today to have you, Urvaji. Whatever you have spoken, you have been very honest, yet candid, deep, and insightful. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Is lovely, and wish you all the success for this beautiful journey ahead. And I love your presence and the vibe that you bring to the entire show.
Means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.